In this video, I'm going to talk about how we introduce a roller for the first time. You can also use these same methods for a horse who isn't particularly happy having a saddle or a roller on as well. The same principles apply. But in this case, this is her first time having the roller on and being introduced to any sort of pressure like that. So I'm going to show how we do it and our methods and why we use these methods. Obviously, there are always other ways of doing things, but this is just to show how we do it. So as you can see, throughout her training, I'm using clicker training and positive reinforcement. So I've got my bag on that's got the treats in it, and before we start with the roller, I'm just reinforcing some of the behaviours we've done before, just to be relaxed and calm and to stay away from the treats effectively. I'm feeding her away from my body and just re-establishing those little things that she's already learned. Now obviously you don't have to use positive reinforcement in your training, but the reason that I start them like this specifically is I find it reduces the stress for them, it makes things so much easier for them to grasp, they learn a lot quicker and they're much happier then in the future, and it gives much more lasting effect as well. So that's why we tend to use these methods, especially with a horse that is maybe more anxious or scared of life in general. This is the much better method to use for them. Once I feel she's at a relaxed state and she's ready, that's when we'll get the roller out and we'll move on to that stage. So stage 2 for me is to quite literally introduce the roller. I want her to look at it and to touch it, and you can see she's actually really not that interested. She's certainly not scared of it, but when she touches it or reaches towards it, that is when I will give her a reward. And I'm rewarding her for being brave or being confident, however you want to see it, in touching something that is new and potentially scary, so that she doesn't find it scary when it then goes on her back. So she's not too bothered about it, I can see that quite quickly. So we move on to the next step in a short space of time. Now it may take longer for you, and that's fine. You need to listen to your horse. If they're not relaxed touching it, then don't move to this step. So as you can see, all I'm doing is I'm gently placing it either against her neck to start with and then further back against her stomach, and what I'm looking for is that she doesn't tense or step away or move her body away slightly, that she stays relaxed throughout and that she's happy with the situation that's going on. If she ever seemed like she was tense, I would go back a step until she was happy for me to build it up again. As with everything, make sure you do both sides so that your horse gets acquainted with the roller touching both sides of their body, because they process information differently from each side. Just because they're good with it on their left doesn't mean they're going to be good with it on their right, and vice versa. So you may find you've got to take more time on one side than the other, and that's perfectly normal. So if that's the case, don't worry. Never rush any of this. If you have to take a lot longer because your horse is worried, then that's fine. Once they're happy at this stage, then I'm happy to move on to the next step. Now that might not all happen in the same day, depending on the horse. If you have an anxious or nervous horse, this may take you a week to get up to this stage. If you have a very bold, confident horse, then you may get a few steps done in one session. Don't forget as well, you don't want to necessarily do too much with them and spend too much time on it. Sort of 10-15 minutes is plenty, and just stop when you get to that stage. As long as you stop on a good note. If you're only still at the first step in those 15 minutes, that's fine. You can do another 15 minutes the next day and the next day and the next day, and you'll make progress doing that. So the third step, when you and your horse are both ready for it, is putting the roller on. Now when I put the roller on, I keep my arm underneath it so that I can take it off quickly if I need to at the first stage, and depending on the horse I may do it very, very, very gently, or if I know they're okay with, say, rugs for example, then I can do it a little bit more normally, more naturally. If they started to tense up at this stage with the roller going over the back and over the other side, then I'd go back a step and make sure they're really solid on that before I came back to this. As before, make sure you do both sides. Even though we're generally going to be tacking it from the left, it's good that they do it from both sides. And you can see now I've started to leave the roller on her while I give her a treat. So she's having a little bit of a longer duration with the pad touching her, and she seems to be absolutely fine with that. So we're continuing. And now we'll move on to what is sort of step 3B, which is just to add in a little bit of movement to make sure that she doesn't mind the pad moving around. You see I'm still holding it, I'm not thumping it down on her, I'm just giving it a little bit of movement so she can feel it on her hair, as well as hear the noises that it makes. Obviously things jingle and make weird noises, and coming from her back that can be a little bit off-putting, so it's good to check that they're okay with that. So step 4 for me is introducing the girth. Now this can be the thing that they don't particularly like, as they can feel quite confined, so I find it's really important to do it really nice and slowly to ensure that you don't have any issues. Once the girth's attached, I do the jingle test again. Obviously girths can be quite noisy as well, and it can be a slightly different sound, so I want to make sure that that's all okay too. And of course it's slightly heavier now having a girth attached to it, and that can make it feel a little bit different. So I'm now going to bring the girth round. I'm just going to hold it against her and not actually do it up on the buckles. This is because, as I said, they can find it a bit restrictive and I don't want to do it up tight. I just want her to feel a little bit of pressure, and if she reacts to that I can release it immediately. But as you can see, she's not having any issues with that. She's quite happy. I can hold the girth there for a reasonable amount of time without any reaction, and for me that's a really, really good thing to see. And at each stage I'm adding a little bit more pressure, but it's still not as tight as going onto the buckles just yet. As you can hear, we've got some nice building work going on in the background as a distraction, so she's doing really well with that as well. Once I'm happy that she's not reacting to the pressure of the girth against her stomach, then I'll very slowly start putting just the front buckle on. I just put it on the first hole. It's very, very loose. It's probably looser than when I was adding the pressure on by hand, and at each stage I'll add a little bit on. I'm checking in with what she's doing, making sure she's happy. If she fidgets or she moves around a little bit and I think she might be tense, I'll stop or slow down for a second before going to the next step. And as you can see, she's getting rewarded at each step, so that I'm making it a nice pleasant experience for her. I'm not just wrenching the girth up and letting her deal with it. I'm doing it very incrementally so that it's not a surprise or a shock to her. So the next time I put the roller on, she'll remember having a nice positive experience, that it wasn't uncomfortable and that she got rewarded for standing calmly and relaxed, rather than having a negative experience the first time and being uncomfortable and then not wanting to have it on again in the future. And my last stage is actually to take it all off. Now, depending on the horse, I may only undo the girth one way and slide it over, which is what I'm going to do with her. If I had something that was a little bit more anxious, then I may go round and undo the girth completely, take it off step by step. Again, judge what your horse is like, and remember, once if they've been nice and calm, that they can have a treat. And I'm just putting the rest of her treats in her manger there, and that's it, she's all done. So that was a total of about 10-15 minutes for her. That was plenty. She was calm enough that I could do each step in one session, which can sometimes happen, but if you have to do one step a session and build it up really gradually, then that's absolutely fine. You want to make sure that they're really relaxed, that they're really happy, that there's no tension, so that you don't have problems further down the line, because what you want is a happy, relaxed horse that wants to have these things on and do these exercises for you, not one that's going to worry whenever they see the tack come out. Hopefully that's given you a bit of an insight, and if you have a young horse you're starting yourself, hopefully that's given you a bit of inspiration on what and how you can start them and get them used to having some tack on. If you want to see some more videos like this, there are more training videos available on our YouTube channel, specifically the Young Horse series that we're doing, where we talk about bitting, having a saddle on for the first time, as well as starting lunging, and how we get to having a rider on for the first time. Everything that you need to know if you're looking at starting a young horse or buying a young horse and you want to know how to do it.